My beloved child, wait, don't scroll away just yet. There is something your soulmate has carried in silence for far too long, and tonight, they can no longer keep it hidden. In the quiet moments when no one is watching, your name still finds its way into their thoughts. They have replayed countless conversations in their mind, wondering if they should speak or remain silent. Every time they decided to stay quiet, one question kept returning. What if I lose the chance to tell them how much they truly matter? If they could stand in front of you right now, they would take a deep breath and say, I never thought I'd have to say this to you, but pretending everything is fine has become harder than telling the truth. It isn't because their feelings disappeared. It's because those feelings became impossible to ignore. They've smiled when everyone expected them to smile, but inside they wished you knew what was really happening in their heart. They have imagined the day they could finally speak honestly without fear, without overthinking every word, and without wondering what tomorrow might bring. Stay with me, because this isn't the end of the story. Your soulmate wants you to know that every meaningful connection reaches a moment where honesty becomes more important than comfort. They've realized that silence may protect the heart for a little while, but it can also keep two people from understanding each other. So tonight, they make a quiet promise to themselves. No more hiding behind uncertainty. No more letting fear speak louder than hope. Only the courage to be genuine, one step at a time. As they reach for their phone, ready to type the words they've rehearsed 100 times, something unexpected happens. A new message appears on the screen before they can send anything. The sender's name makes them stop completely. Their heartbeat quickens. Because what they are about to read could change everything they believed about the future, and nothing will feel quite the same after this moment. The message stayed on the screen. Your soulmate stared at it without moving, almost afraid that reading it would change everything. For a few long seconds, they simply watched the words, wondering if this was the moment life had been preparing them for all along. With a deep breath, they finally opened it. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't bad news. It was a simple reminder from someone they trusted. The things left unsaid often become the greatest regrets. If someone truly matters to you, don't let another day pass without honesty. Your soulmate read that sentence again. And then again. It felt as though every doubt they had been carrying suddenly became lighter. They whispered to themselves, maybe I've been waiting for the perfect moment, when all I ever needed was the courage to begin. Don't skip this part. Because what happened next surprised even them. Instead of typing a long message, they opened an old conversation with you. They smiled at the memories. The laughter. The kind words. The moments that had quietly stayed in their heart long after everyone else had forgotten them. For the first time, they stopped asking themselves, what if this doesn't work? Instead, a new question filled their mind. What if this is the opportunity I've been afraid to accept? That single thought changed everything. Your soulmate placed the phone down for a moment, looked out the window, and realized that hope feels different when it is finally accompanied by honesty. They knew they couldn't rewrite the past. But they could choose what happened next. As they picked up the phone once more, their fingers slowly moved toward the keyboard. The first sentence appeared on the screen. Then they paused. Because just before pressing send, they noticed something that made their heart race. A notification appeared with your name on it. And what they were about to discover would make them question whether this was only a coincidence. Or the beginning of a brand new chapter. A quiet smile crossed your soulmate's face the moment they saw your name appear on the screen. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stand still. They hadn't expected this. Not today. Not at the exact moment they had finally found the courage to be honest. Their hands trembled slightly as they opened the notification. It wasn't a dramatic confession. It wasn't a grand announcement. It was a simple message, kind, thoughtful, and genuine. Yet those few words carried more hope than they had imagined possible. Your soulmate leaned back and whispered, maybe I've been overthinking this all along. For so long, fear had convinced them that silence was safer than vulnerability. But now they were beginning to understand something different. Sometimes the smallest moments become the turning points that change everything. Don't skip this part. Because the next decision came straight from the heart. They erased the long speech they had been writing. Instead, they chose honesty over perfection. No carefully rehearsed lines. No attempts to sound impressive. Only words that truly reflected what they felt. They looked up for a moment and quietly said, "If this connection is meant to grow, it should begin with truth, not with fear." With renewed confidence, they pressed send. The message was finally on its way. There was no taking it back. For the first few moments, nothing happened. The screen remained still. Your soulmate smiled anyway. For the first time in a long while, they felt at peace, not because they knew what the outcome would be, but because they had chosen courage instead of hesitation. Then, the phone vibrated. A reply had arrived much sooner than expected. Your soulmate took a slow breath before opening it. As they read the first line, their eyes widened with surprise. The response wasn't what they had imagined. It carried a truth that neither of you had ever spoken aloud before. And that unexpected revelation was about to begin a completely new chapter. For a moment, your soulmate couldn't bring themselves to open the reply. Their heart was racing. Not because they expected disappointment, but because they knew that a single message could change the direction of everything they had been feeling. With one steady breath, they tapped the screen. The first sentence was simple. "Thank you for being honest." Your soulmate read those 5 words again and again. A weight they had carried for so long began to lift. They finally understood that honesty doesn't always receive an immediate answer, but it always creates a place where trust can begin. Don't leave just yet. Because the conversation was only beginning. The messages that followed weren't filled with dramatic promises. Instead, they were filled with something much rarer. Understanding. Both of you spoke about moments that had never been mentioned before. The times you almost reached out. The conversations that stayed unfinished. The questions that remained locked away because neither of you wanted to make the first move. As each message appeared, your soulmate realized something surprising. The distance between two hearts isn't always measured in miles. Sometimes it's measured in the words left unsaid. They smiled quietly and whispered, "I never thought I'd have to say this to you, but telling the truth feels more peaceful than hiding it ever did." That single realization changed everything. For the first time, they stopped wondering whether they were enough. Instead, they began focusing on becoming the most genuine version of themselves. Outside, the evening sky slowly faded into night. Your soulmate looked up, feeling an unexpected sense of calm. It wasn't because every question had been answered. It was because hope had finally replaced hesitation. Just as they were about to put their phone away, another message appeared. It wasn't from you. It was from someone who knew both of you. The preview read only one sentence. "There's something important you both need to know before you take the next step." Your soulmate's smile faded into quiet curiosity. They opened the message. And what they discovered next would make them see your connection from an entirely new perspective. The message came from someone who had quietly watched your journey from the beginning. Your soulmate hesitated before opening it. Something about the timing felt too perfect to ignore. As the message unfolded on the screen, every word seemed to carry unexpected wisdom. "I've seen both of you encourage others, even while carrying your own questions. I've seen moments when you almost crossed paths, yet life asked you to grow a little more first. Don't mistake the waiting for failure. Sometimes the strongest connections are built through patience." Your soulmate sat in complete silence. Those words didn't create fear. They created clarity. For so long, they believed every delay meant something was going wrong. Now they were beginning to see another possibility. Maybe every season had been preparing both of you to meet with greater understanding, kindness, and maturity. Don't skip this moment. Because what happened next surprised even your soulmate. Instead of rushing to send another message, they closed their eyes for a moment and made a quiet promise. If this story is going to continue, I want it to be built on honesty, respect, and patience. I don't want fear to guide another decision. When they opened their eyes again, they noticed something they had overlooked. Your conversation was still open. At the very top of the screen was your most recent reply. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. But it carried a warmth that stayed with them. Your soulmate smiled and whispered. Maybe the greatest turning points don't arrive with loud announcements. Maybe they begin with one sincere conversation. Just then, another notification appeared. This time it wasn't a text. It was an invitation. A place. A date. A chance for the two of you to finally have the conversation that neither of you had ever been brave enough to begin. Your soulmate looked at the screen, took a slow breath, and quietly said, "Whatever happens next, I'll meet it with an open heart." As they reached toward the accept button, one final detail caught their attention. The name of the person who had arranged the meeting made them stop completely. It was someone neither of you expected. A quiet silence filled the room as your soulmate looked at the name on the invitation. They blinked once. Then again. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't someone trying to interfere. It was a person who had quietly believed that the two of you would one day have an honest conversation. Your soulmate smiled with disbelief and whispered, "They saw something in us before we could even see it ourselves." Don't skip this part. Because what happened next wasn't about fate forcing two lives together, it was about two people finally choosing courage over hesitation. For the next few days, your soulmate didn't spend time rehearsing perfect words anymore. Instead, they reflected on the person they wanted to become. Someone who listened before speaking. Someone who respected your thoughts and feelings. Someone who no longer allowed fear to write the ending of the story. The closer the meeting came, the calmer they felt. That surprised them. They had expected anxiety. Instead, there was peace. Not because they knew exactly what would happen, but because they had finally accepted that genuine relationships are built one honest conversation at a time. On the morning of the meeting, they looked into the mirror and quietly said, "I never thought I'd have to say this to you, but thank you for helping me become braver, even before we had this conversation." Those words weren't rehearsed. They came straight from the heart. As they arrived at the meeting place, they noticed something unexpected. A small handwritten envelope rested on the table with both of your names written across the front. No sender. No explanation. Only one short sentence written underneath. "Before either of you speaks, read this together." Your soulmate gently picked up the envelope. Their heartbeat quickened. They knew whatever was inside wasn't going to predict the future. But somehow, it already felt like the beginning of a completely new chapter, one that would be written not by fear, but by honesty, trust, and the choices both of you would make from this moment forward. My beloved child, stay with this moment, because what happened after your soulmate opened that envelope was something neither of you expected. With steady hands, they slowly unfolded the letter. The paper contained only a few lines, yet every word carried quiet meaning. Today is not about proving who is right. It is not about revisiting every mistake. It is about giving honesty the chance it has been waiting for. Your soulmate paused. They read the words twice. Then they smiled. For so long, they had believed that every conversation needed perfect timing and perfect answers. Now they realized something far more important. Sometimes, the greatest conversations begin with two people simply willing to listen. Don't skip this part. Because the next few minutes changed everything. A familiar voice gently called their name. Your soulmate looked up. There you were. For a brief moment, neither of you spoke. There was no awkwardness. No rush. Only a quiet understanding that this meeting mattered. Your soulmate took one small step forward and softly said, I never thought I'd have to say this to you, but meeting you has taught me more about courage than I ever expected. The words were simple. They weren't dramatic. They were real. You listened carefully, and instead of interrupting, you smiled with kindness. That single smile gave your soulmate the confidence they had been searching for all this time. The conversation that followed wasn't about the past alone. It was about the future. About choosing openness instead of assumptions. About building trust one conversation at a time. As the sun slowly began to set, both of you realized something beautiful. The greatest change wasn't that life had suddenly become perfect. The greatest change was that fear no longer controlled the story. Just as you were preparing to leave, your soulmate noticed a small folded note tucked beneath the envelope. They hadn't seen it before. Curious, they opened it. Inside was one final handwritten sentence. This meeting was only the beginning, the next chapter will ask both of you a question that only your hearts can answer. Your soulmate looked at you, folded the note carefully, and smiled. Some stories don't end with a single conversation. Sometimes. That's exactly where the real journey begins. The evening breeze grew gentler as both of you stood there for another moment, neither wanting to rush what had just begun. Your soulmate folded the handwritten note and placed it carefully into their pocket. They weren't holding on to a prediction. They were holding on to a reminder. A reminder that meaningful connections are built through honesty, patience, and the willingness to understand one another. Don't skip this part. Because the next decision didn't come from excitement. It came from quiet confidence. Your soulmate looked at you and said softly, For so long, I thought I needed all the answers before speaking to you. Now I realize that what truly matters is being genuine. You smiled. Not because every uncertainty had disappeared, but because those words felt sincere. The conversation continued naturally. You shared stories that had never been told before. Moments when you almost reached out. Times when life became busy and silence filled the space where conversations could have grown. With every sentence, both of you discovered something unexpected. Neither of you had forgotten. You had simply been waiting for the right opportunity to speak openly. As the sky slowly turned golden, your soulmate noticed how peaceful everything felt. There was no pressure to force the future. No need to make promises that neither of you could guarantee. Instead, you both agreed on something simple. To move forward with honesty. To communicate with respect. And to allow trust to grow one day at a time. Just before saying goodbye, your soulmate reached into their pocket one last time. The folded note slipped out. As it unfolded in the wind, another line of writing appeared on the back, so faint that it hadn't been noticed before. It read, The next time your paths cross, one question will be asked, and the answer will open a door neither of you expected. Your soulmate looked at the words, then looked back at you with a hopeful smile. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel uncertain. It felt full of possibility. And deep inside, both of you sensed that this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a new chapter waiting to be written together. Part 8. The next morning, your soulmate woke up with an unfamiliar feeling. It wasn't uncertainty. It wasn't fear. It was quiet confidence. For the first time in a long while, they weren't wondering what might happen next. They were simply grateful that honesty had finally replaced silence. Don't skip this part. Because what happened later that day felt too meaningful to ignore. As they went about their routine, their phone vibrated once again. This time, it wasn't a long message. It was a simple invitation. Would you like to meet again? There's still so much I'd like to talk about. Your soulmate looked at the screen and smiled. Not because everything had suddenly become perfect, but because genuine conversations always create room for another one. They whispered. I never thought I'd have to say this to you, but I'm no longer afraid of where this journey might lead. A few hours later, the two of you met again. The conversation flowed more naturally than before. There were smiles where there had once been hesitation. There was understanding where there had once been assumptions. You spoke about dreams, future plans, and the kind of life built on trust instead of uncertainty. Your soulmate realized something beautiful. The strongest connections aren't formed in a single unforgettable moment. They're built through many small moments of kindness, honesty, and patience. As the evening came to a close, you both stood to leave. Just before walking away, you turned back with a gentle smile and said, I'm really glad we had this conversation. Those simple words stayed with your soulmate long after the meeting ended. As they walked home beneath the evening sky, their phone lit up one final time. It was a calendar reminder they didn't remember creating. The title was only 5 words long. The beginning of something real. Your soulmate stopped walking. They looked at the words, smiled quietly, and knew that this story wasn't being written by fear anymore. It was being written one honest choice at a time. And the very next chapter would reveal a decision that neither of you saw coming.